Hello and good afternoon to this webinar. Today we're talking about SAP hacking. Let Google hack your SAP system. I've given a presentation a year ago at the SAP Insider and at SAP Sapphire and I think at TechHead as well. Today we will be looking into a very similar presentation, just a couple of new hacks and a few new things that we should keep into consideration when we try to secure our SAP system. From the outline today, let's see if that works. I will be using the SAP Insider presentation, the slide deck that I've put together for SAP Insider. Unfortunately, the conference got postponed, but I will be using the same slide deck so that you can get the same session as you would get when you would join it in Vegas. In this session, we will be talking about how we can effectively protect our SAP system from known vulnerabilities that we can find on Google. So I try to all the hacks and vulnerabilities I'm showing you, they can be easily accessed through Google. So if we just take some time and some energy and we go on Google and try to find ways to hack an SAP system, that's something everyone can do. And I think at least we should have at least certain protections in place to avoid the easiest hack that are out there. I will not only show you how we can hack an SAP system, we'll also talk about tips and tricks and ways to secure the SAP system, especially when it comes to roles and authorizations, because roles and authorization at the end of the day is really what makes an SAP system secure. Because if someone doesn't have the access to execute a certain task or certain transaction, then it's very difficult to do. There's always ways around that. But I think when we have our roles and authorizations under control and that in all the systems, I think we have a very high level of protection. All right. So first we'll talk about the SAP systems and its endless possibilities. There's a lot of ways we can hack an SAP systems. SAP systems are also very attractive to hackers, and that's mainly because in our SAP system we store a vast amount of data that contains, for example, our master data when it comes to customers, to vendors, our employees, HR master data is in there. But then also, for example, our recipes, our bill of materials, how my company operates, financial information, and so on. So it's a very attractive system, and that's why we have to have protective measures in place. There are certain matter of facts, as I call them, that a lot of people believe in and think, oh yeah, for example, if you want to develop a program, if you want to create a program, you have to be a developer, and in order to develop, you need a developer key. I'm telling you that's not ultimately true. We'll see what that means. So there's certain matter of facts in place that we believe, but we should not just trust them fully, because there's always ways around, and we have to protect ourselves against that as well. And I want to show you that in a live demo. So whatever works. I have to keep that in mind. So I'll show you just a few things, 2-3 hacks here. Given the time constraint, we can always show you more if you're interested. Just let us know. And basically, whatever I'm showing you, we can extract from Google. So if I go on Google and I search for certain terms, terminologies, I can find a lot of information, which is very, very let's call it dangerous, because with that knowledge, I can exploit an SAP system. But it's also important whenever there's knowledge revealed, there's a lack of knowledge at the same time. That's why it's always important to protect our systems, because something that gets revealed by someone else might reuse that information to attack us. And we'll be talking about the SAP notes as well, where SAP provides us with, for example, patches and fixes to known bugs. If it's known and if it's revealed, then someone else can exploit that to attack us. So that's kind of like the story of today's webinar, and we'll jump right in with the endless possibilities that are there. When we talk about SAP hacking or SAP security, why are we talking about SAP hacking? SAP security is usually in organizations under the umbrella of cybersecurity. So every company should have a cybersecurity strategy. And part of that cybersecurity strategy is also to protect our SAP systems, along with all the other systems that we have in use. But SAP, as I said before, very interesting, very attractive systems. And cybersecurity nowadays is a huge topic. When we think about just a couple of facts here, which are unrelated to SAP, but when we think about, like, how much malware there is every day, how many attacks there's every day, how many phishing attempts there are every day, there's 4.3 million phishing attempts an hour. Imagine that. You might get an email or two, every so often, and the better your company protects you, has protections in place, you might get less. But there's a lot of phishing attempts that are trying to get to your username, password, and so on. And that can be for your email accounts, for your companies. Kind of different attempts can just be like a random email, that doesn't have a lot of success. But it can also be very specific attempts, like a spear phishing attempt, for example, where someone is targeting you as a person, or you as an individual, or you as a company. Cybersecurity budgets are going up every year. Companies have to spend more and more money, and that's just because we're more and more connected. So interconnectivity is a big topic, and we have to protect ourselves much better. And SAP security is part of a good cybersecurity strategy. So in an SAP system, when we talk about the endless possibilities, when we think about traditional SAP system, an ECC, like an ERP that sits on a SAP NetViewer stack, when we think about how many transactions are there, tables, programs, function modules, it's a lot. I don't know if you know how many there are, but when you think about just a SAP NetViewer stack, there's more than 7,500 transactions. That's just the plain installation of the ABAP stack. When you put on an ERP, there's more than 140,000. If you go to S/4HANA, it's even more. There's a lot of tables that hold and contain our data. Again, it's huge numbers, tables that need to be protected. And later down the road, we'll talk about roles and authorizations. For example, how do we protect table access? It's a big one, because you see here there's a lot of tables that hold information that might be sensitive, critical, and that needs to be protected. There's also views on tables, so that allows us to kind of display the content of a table. It's more than 50,000 in an ERP system. If we talk about programs, there's more than 5 million programs in an ERP. Just on a plain ABAP, NetViewer is more than 1 million. So all those programs, they process and manipulate data, and that has they can do certain things that are, or that might be critical and might be dangerous and needs to be protected. There's a lot of reports that just read data. And then we have function modules. And function modules, that's usually a big topic when we talk about RFC security, the remote function call, that are enabled in some of the function modules that are allowed to be called outside the system. So I can call from one system to another. When we think about an ERP, there's more than 500,000. So it's a lot of function modules that are out there. And a good chunk of them is remote enabled, which means I can call them from outside the system. So I don't have to be physically in that system. I can kind of call in. Granted, I need authentication measures like a username, password, or might be a trusted connection, but I need some sort of way to get into the system to call it. But there's a lot of ways to do that, and I'll show you that in just a second. So there's a lot of possibilities. And like I said before, it's very important that we protect our system. And the problem with SAP system is also, like with every other IT system, is that it changes over time. So because we are enhancing, so for example, SAP is patching certain things, SAP is enhancing functionality, there's new functionality, there's new tools, SAP might bring in third party, and then make it part of the offering. So with every enhancement package, every upgrade patch, there will be more and more. When we think about the ERP enhancement package 1, there was like 112,000 transactions, roughly 2,700 authorization objects that protected the data, the program transactions, and so on. When we look at enhancement package 5, the number increased a lot, and enhancement package 8 as well. So from 1 to 8 on just enhancement package for ERP, from an authorization object perspective, we had an increase of 1,000. That's almost a third. an increase by a third, which means we have to always take those authorizations into consideration, because new functionality and enhanced functionality will require new or enhanced authorization and authorization objects. So we always, whenever we upgrade our system, we also have to talk about the authorizations, because we know very often we just generally authorize users, especially our RFC users, to run on SAP all. And that's very dangerous, because there's always new functionality that we don't know, that's new to us, that needs to be protected. And if you don't know how to properly, that might open up a vulnerability to, for example, a hacker. Can be an internal one, can be an external one, but we want to have it protected as much as we can. When we think about our entire SAP landscape, we're not only running a SAP ERP or be the S/4HANA system. We have other systems as well, like for example our customer relationship management system, our supplier relationship management system. We run a BI, we run HCM. We might have a COA for central user administration. We have maybe GRC or IDM in place. We have a solution manager. So we have a lot of systems, and they all are connected to each other. There's a lot of interconnectivity between systems. They exchange data because they have to, because we want to maintain customer master, for example, centrally. They want to maintain it everywhere. But then we have interfaces that exchange the data, and those interfaces they have a lot of access because they have to be able to access the data. Like I said initially, the SAP systems are amongst the most lucrative systems to attack, especially for data theft and process manipulation. And that's mainly because there's a lot of data in there, which is very attractive to a hacker or someone that wants to harm us, be it like an individual who maybe just wants to hold us ransom, or someone that wants to steal our intellectual property, or someone that's just interested to see if they can get in. But that all opens up a lot of other issues down the line. SAP has a security patch day, and that's since 2010. It's every second Tuesday every month, which means every second Tuesday a month, SAP releases the latest patches, which kind of reveal the issues or the bugs in the SAP system. And that's everyone else does that, even Microsoft and every other software company does that, because our code is never 100% bug free. So there's always something that we haven't thought about, or got in there, and someone did a mistake, whatever the case might be. But the problem with those with that security patch day is that SAP will release it every second Tuesday, which means if hackers are just following the patch days, they always know what's the vulnerability, and they can exploit that. So it's very important that we keep up with the SAP patching. So we should not fall too far behind the patch days, because as I said, those vulnerabilities are known. What are popular methods to attack an SAP system? Very often it's that we are exploiting or misusing the standard functions in the ABAP stack. So those, for example, the function models, the programs that are there, because that's very common. That's installed across all the systems, because all the ABAP systems, they have the ABAP stack, which means that if you exploit one functionality in there, it's very likely to gain access to a lot of systems. And then also function modules, especially like we will talk about RFC here in just a little bit, where, for example, hack a weak system that's connected to a strong system, and then we go from the weak to the strong. And I will show a specific hack to that as well, how we can do that. Other ways are weaknesses in the SAP gateway, where we might access the database through our operating system. The different ways, also backdoors are always a big one, and especially when we have portals running, and I'll show that here in a second as well. It's for some of our SAP systems, it's very important that they are accessible from outside our internal network. So for example, our vendor portal, our customer portal, we want our vendors to enter data into our system. For that I have to make my SAP system, or have to open it up to the cloud or to the World Wide Web, so that my vendors can access it. If my vendor can access it, someone else might too. And that I have to keep in mind, and that means also I have to keep in mind those security measures that I want to put into place. When let's say I want to attack I'm a hacker, or I'm just a guy that got laid off, and I'm bored, or I have too much time, I'm interested in a topic. Where do I start? I start off Google. I'm a big Google guy. I Google everything. I even Google my own blogs because I know I wrote something 2 or 5 years ago, but I cannot find it. Then I just Google it and I'll find it. So Google knows everything. Google is my source of knowledge. When I Google for SAP hacking, there's roughly 9 million results. So if I just don't know what to search for, I go SAP hacking, and then I just go through the millions of pages that are there. That gives me results and very good information. I can then also, when I just Google SAP hacking and something crosses my eye, I was like, okay, what's penetration testing? What's password cracking? Callback attacks, and so on. What's RFC hacking? From one I go to the next, and I just keep digging, and unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to see it, there's a lot of knowledge out there, especially security companies like ourselves, but then also others. I have a couple, we can see a couple here. They also, blog or post, some hacks because, gives you attention, but then also it shows you how easy it can be. Like here we have one on the left-hand side, how to hack an SAP system in 3 minutes. That sounds kind of like, oh, I got 5 minutes spare, so let's try it. So that's a big problem. Everyone can Google and everyone can get the information. And that's why we have to take, certain measures. What I initially said is like, there's certain matter of facts, and I want to just hear a little bit why we should question them. There's rules in SAP System, like I said before, to develop, you need a developer key. Developer keys, they can only be generated to the administrator on the sub-service portal. You all know that if you're a basis admin or security guy, you need the developer key. It has to be generated, and then you enter it, and then you are able to develop if you have the authorizations, and so on. Other ones like cracking passwords can only be done by expert hackers. Not so sure about that. So I'm telling you, all those rules that we can see here, they're not entirely true. There's always ways around that. Even though we think, no, it's not possible, there are ways to do that. And let's see what that means. I just want to pick out a few and show a couple of others here as well. But let's start with that developer key, because I think that's an important one. Why do I think it's an important one? Basically because it has a lot to do with authorizations as well. Because to develop, I also need certain authorizations. So I need debugging, developing authorizations. I have to get the transaction, like for example SC38. Or SC37, SC80, whatever transaction might be, I need access to go there. And then I also need, the proper authorization objects that give me access. But let's say I have a development system, or I have a sandbox, and no one really cares about the authorization, so they give me SAP all. It's only a dev system or a sandbox. Nothing critical in there. We have no business data. You can do whatever you want to do. So let's see what we can do with that. So if I go on Google, like I said before, if I search, for example, SAP hacking, you can see there's a lot of results. And that changes every day. Last week it was 8 million, now it's 6.7. But fact is, there's a lot. So what I want to do is I want to develop. So let's go to my SAP system. I have two systems that we'll get back to that. I have my GRC system, which let's call it my sandbox, and then I have an ERP, where I have, this my productive system, where I have, all the, the good information is in there. But I don't have access in the ERP, or very limited. So I want to see what I can do in my XIC system, which is, just a development system, a sandbox to play around. And here I have a test user. Like I said before, usually my security admins, they don't do a very good job in protecting our dev systems. So I can see here my test user, it runs on SAP all. So no, actually it doesn't. Let me quickly change that. Let me just quickly give SAP all, so just that we can see I actually have SAP all. Okay, I'm not authorized. That's always when I do a demo. Someone changed my user. So let me quickly log on with my user, because we want to kind of show it as a real scenario where someone gave me too much access. I just assign here. Yep. Looks like I didn't do it the first time, right? So here we go. So let's just give here SAP all. Like we've said, that's very common. See, there's a lot that user has SAP all. So now with my test user, we can see it down here. That's now my test user. I now have SAP all, which means I can go to transactions like SE38, where I can, for example, create a program or a report. So let's try to create one, because I have SAP all, so I can definitely do that. Let's call it demo webinar. Let's click on create. Now what we can see is I'm not a registered developer, so I don't have a developer key. So there's a few ways now, and if, I can go to my basis guy or my whoever is in charge of the support portal and tell him to generate one. But I'm not from security, I'm not from basis. I'm a business person. So they will not give me that. So I can Google. I have it here on my slides. But if you just Google for ABAP developer key, or bypassing ABAP developer key, hijacking developer key, or hacking ABAP developer key, we will sooner or later get to an article on the SCN, which is the SAP Community Network. And there's a guy there that asks about developer key and how that can be done. And there's a lot of people that answer the question, and there's one from Julius here on the bottom right, where it says you can either hijack the user by changing the password and log on, or you can get one from the developer key in the SAP marketplace. Like we said, we don't want to hijack a user password because they would see that I changed the password. Marketplace, like I said, I'm not a basis guy, so I'm not a developer. No one will give me the key. But then he says, oh, there's another option. There's an option that is called jump the wall. All right, jump the wall sounds very interesting to me. And if we just let's go on Google, and here I have, by the way, I have it here open. If we go and say, okay, SAP jump the wall, let's see what comes back from jump the wall. If we go here, a lot of results. Let's check this one here. All right, here's jump the wall. So what does it say here? Okay, we have to turn down the music, close the door, look around. Is anyone looking at you? No, no one's looking at me. And no, I'm not being watched. There's no security cameras. I think I'm good. I can try and hack. So what does it say? It's a step-by-step guide here, how I can hack, I guess. I don't really know what jump the wall means, but let's find it out. Okay, I have to go to SE38, open key ls key F00, it's a program, and search for jump the wall and insert a breakpoint on the line check C super C not equal to 0. So let's do that. Go back here. We can go out here because I don't have access. That's the program, ls key F00. We hit display. Again, we remember I have SAP all. I can do everything in the system because I have all the authorizations. So let's just go here. And then it says in the program, search for jump the wall. We hit Control F for search, jump the wall. Okay, I might have misspelled it, or it says, oh, with underscore, jump the wall. And then we can see here, it found a form, jump the wall. And it says, find for check C super C not equals 0 and put a breakpoint there. So now I have to know, either I know how to do, set a breakpoint, or I Google it. Very easy. Either I can do it here, set breakpoint, or I can just click here on the line and it sets a breakpoint. So what does a breakpoint mean? It means when the program is executed, the code will stop there and will bring me to the debugger so I can debug. Okay, I set the breakpoint here. Let's check what we have to do. It says while still in SCR, open a standard program you want to alter and click on modify. The debugger opens up. Okay, after the value C super C variable to 0 and then advance with F8. Okay, so let's try that. So we're here. Let's open up another session, 38 again. And then let's scroll and try that again. Webinar program, create. And now we can see the ABAP debugger is starting. And now I'm connected to a debugging session. And in the debugging session, I'm now stopped here. And now, again, I have to know a little bit how to do that. But if you're a little, IT guy, or you just Google hard enough, or you try and error, you will find out. So if you double click on the variable here, we can see that C super C is 1, which means it's not equal to 0. That's why it's probably not working. So on the instruction, it says change the variable, the value back to 0, so it passes. What does that C super C mean? That's the return code. So there was a check. It was a check if I have access. If I'm a developer, do I have access to developer key? I don't. That's why the value is 1. If it's not equal to 0, so if it's greater than 0, that means something failed. And it's very common in SAP programs to use that C super C. Whenever it's unequal or not equal to 0, that means something failed. Which is okay because I don't have a developer key. So let's just click here, change it back to 0, kind of like saying, okay, I have a developer key, and then just continue. We can hit F8, or we can just hit here continue. The program will continue, and now we can see we're a step further. Now I can define the program attribute. So I can now say, okay, what's my title? Test webinar. What type do I want to select it? Let's call it an executable program. It's just a test program, doesn't really matter. I save it. It goes back to the debugger. Again, here I don't have the access. Change back to 0. We have to do that a few times now because it's a couple of checks. If I have access, I just want to write it to a local object. Doesn't really matter. Again, don't have the access here. I go change it back to 0. Advance again. Oh, comes back again. Just a few times here because it checks, in a couple of occasions. We continue again. And then if you're lucky, the program has been created. So now we can see I have a program here. So I can now write my own program. The only thing I have is sub all. I don't have a developer key. Even if you go back and here, again, I could do now everything. Like you probably, you see them here. I can change. I can now do read table, drop table, whatever I want to do, and just read data, whatever I do. I can do it here. Now, again, I need to know ABAP if I want to write code, but there's a lot of, samples on Google as well. So I might find, a couple of lines that allow me to do certain things, and then I just manipulate, or I play around. And playing around with code can be very dangerous because I can, delete tables, I can delete content, I can manipulate a lot of things. And not only in my client. So here I might be in client 001, but I can also access data from table 3000, or from any other client, even it could be a golden client, whatever it might be. What's important is if we go to SE16 and we check table dev access, where we have the developer keys, we can see here there's no entry for TABA, which is my test user. I don't have an access key. We can see it down here. The user ID I'm using right now is my test user, and that one does not have a developer key. So if someone monitors dev access to see if someone just provided a developer key, which they should not have, it would be in the table dev access. But I'm not doing that. I'm just bypassing or manipulating the return code to pretend I have one, even though I don't have one. That's entirely possible just because I have sub all. I have too much access. I can debug and I can change in debug. So it's called debug and change, which is very, very dangerous. It's kind of similar to sub all. With debug and change, I can do everything in the SAP system. That's just one hack here. Again, we Google, we find something, we go further, and we'll find something that's dangerous. The problem now with that is, it's kind of difficult because every time I want to program something, it will kick in that, the debugger will kick in again. And, it's just pain in the butt to always bypass the debugger, because I always have to change return code to 0. So if I search hard enough, and I don't want to show you where we can find it, but there's only 10 lines of code, and if you Google hard enough, you will find those 10 lines of code With those 10 lines of code, you can manipulate every single program in the SAP system. And I can show you here, and I will not show the code because I think it's very dangerous. I don't want to show it unless you find it yourself. But I can write 10 lines of code that's in here. I can code it whatever I want, edit with that jump the wall, what I just showed you before. And then I have a small program, or I can hide it somewhere. Here I call it finance rebate calculations. Nothing that is that sounds like it's a hacking program. But what I can do here is I can provide a program or a report name, and I can change that. So if I have one here, I think it's called common injection. I think it's one of my reports, and I can say execute. And again, I don't have a developer key, but with that jump the wall, I added a little bit of code, which is only 10 lines. And now that 10 lines of code allow me to change every program in the system. So we can see here, I can take out, for example, authorization check, I take it out, I save it, and now that program got changed. So we can see it if I go back and we go back in here, we can now see that authorization check is gone. So with that jump the wall, I cannot only just create a program or do something stupid, I can also plant hidden code somewhere. And again, all it needs is 10 lines, and I can change every single code in the system without even having to have a developer key. So very dangerous, and that's also a reason why we should always have our developing authorizations under control. Don't want to give anyone the access to write code or manipulate code, because that's something that can happen, and that happens. We have seen it with customers that got was a big finding, big issue, just because we had SAP all given, for example, in a development system to use that are not developers. And I go back to my slide deck. I want to show you a couple more here. Just if you're fancy to read up on it, I have the screenshot here. That's the code. Even though I said I want to give it, but it's 10 lines, and that 10 lines of code allow you to change everything in the system. Password cracking. Again, if you want to crack passwords, and it's not very hard, super easy. We just Google, we'll find the tools, we will find step-by-step guides how to do that. It's a very easy thing, and I'll get back to it here in just a second. When we go and Google more, there's certain things we can Google, we can find. One more I want to show you is an RFC hack. When we have, for example, a connection between a weak system and a strong system, or just between systems, and we don't protect it properly. So a lot of customers that we come across are, they're running all their RFCs on SAP all. So we don't know what to authorize, so we just generally authorize the RFC users. And the easiest is just SAP all, SAP new, because then everything works. And we will fix the interface later. Very often later is never. A few years down the road, we figure out we have big audit findings because all our interfaces are running SAP all, and we simply don't know what to authorize because we don't know what the interfaces are used for. So that's a big problem, and that's also one of the easiest way to exploit our SAP systems. So like I said, I want to get into that ERP system where we have, that's our master, all our data's in here. I don't have access, or only very limited access because I'm a business user, but they gave me full access to other systems. I have SAP all, like I just said before. I'm still in my XAC system, and let's just see if I Google hard enough, I'll get step-by-step guides how we can do an RFC hack. But basically, in transaction SM59, we can see all our RFC connections. We can see here it's connected to different systems, HR, and so on, because, again, all the systems have to be connected, or most of them have to be connected. And that's a connection to my XIE. My XIE is my ERP. That's where, I want to get in. If we go on and we see here that RFC destination, it's a connection to my XIE system. we look into logon and security, we can see, okay, there's an RFC user maintained, and like I said, I assume that it runs on SAP all, because my my security guys, they do a sloppy job in authorizing it properly. So I'm very positive that this runs on SAP all. We can do a connection test to see if the connection is working. Yes, it is. Everything's working. So how about I log on to that XIE system? I don't know how. I can do remote logon, but the problem here now, remote logon doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because it should use the username here. But RFC users, they should be of user type system. And system users, they don't allow a dialog logon. So that's why remote logon will not work, because the user type doesn't allow a GUI session. If we go and let's say, how about if we change that user? Let's just see SAP change user. Let's call it hacking. And then, here's a lot of explanation how to hack SAP, RFC hacking, and so on. So if we just take one of them, they will walk us through. I'll just do that now here, because I don't want to spend too much time in reading Google. You guys can do that yourself. But basically what I can do is I can, for example, change or use that interface and that user that's maintaining that interface to execute a function module in that XIE system, in my ERP system. And all I have to do is I have to change a user, or I create a user, whatever I want to do. I could, for example, use a function module that allows me to assign a profile or a role, and I assign a role to myself in the productive ERP system. The problem is, they're monitoring that, or a GRC risk analysis will show that I have access that's not mitigated. I'm not a basis guy, so they will probably question why that happened. So how about I just use that RFC user? I change that one to a user type dialog, so that we can do a remote logon. So I'm not changing my user. I'm just changing the RFC user. Okay, if we Google, it will tell us to go to transaction SE37, where we can maintain and test function modules. And that's a function module called BAPI user change. BAPI user change is a function module that comes with the ABAP stack, used, for example, by the CUA to change users. That's why it is remote enabled. So I can call that from another system. And if I now go and just test that function module, I can test it here. Again, I'm in my XIE system. But here I can test it in an RFC target system. So if I have an RFC connection to a target, I can put that in here. So let's just do that. Go back to the other screen. That's my RFC destination. All I do is copy paste so that I don't do mistakes. And then I have to know a little bit what I do with the import parameters here. But again, Google will tell you. We change a user. Which user do we change? We change that user, because that user exists in XIE. That's the user name that we want to change. And then we want to change, let's change the logon data. And you can see here, we can change a lot of things. We can change the passwords. We can, we can do a lot of things. But let's change the logon data. In the logon data, that's not technical names that you have to understand. But the third field here is U, stands for user type. Right now, the user type is system, which is B. We want to change it to dialog, and dialog is A. So we change it to user type A, dialog. And then we also have to give the flag here, which field to change. We say the dialog, the third one, we just give an X, kind of like a true. Let's change that field. Again, you have to know that, but Google will tell you. And then let's just execute it. Let's just try test. Okay, execute. Then it executed. And down here, we can now see there's a result, a return, and it says user has changed. Okay, the user changed. Let's go back to my SM59. We remember when I clicked remote logon earlier, it didn't work. So let's click it again, remote logon. And now we can see the GUI pops up. And we are now in XIE, and I'm logged on with user RFC XIE. So I'm now in here in my ERP with my RFC user, and I can go to start SAP access, and we can see if we go to SU01 and open up that RFC that I'm now in here with SAP all, because again, like I said, my security guys They did a sloppy job. They just gave SAP all, so it works. But now I'm in the ERP system. And what happened is we changed that user type to dialog. It was system earlier, which didn't allow a remote log on, but now it's dialog. The bad thing about that hack, if you go to the change documents, and what's the date today? The 30th, I guess. So we just see today. We just go to the user type. We just want to see what changes happened to the user type. We can now see that the user type got changed from B, which was system, to A, dialog. The bad thing about it, the changed by is the RFC interface itself. So it does not say Alessandro Banzer or whatever your name is. It actually says the RFC. So very difficult to now detect how that happened, because it clearly says the RFC changed it. Now we have to figure out, from where it came, and where it originated, and that's very difficult to find out, because there's nothing that we did in XIE, so we have to now find the backend system and then see who might have misused his or her authorization. So very, very difficult to detect. Again, if I wanna kind of hide my traces a little bit, it probably pops up if it's a type dialog. So I just change it to system and I save it. Now I'm still in the session, so it doesn't log me off. But as long as I'm in here, I can do everything. So I can now run every single transaction I want, whatever the transaction might be, for example, to display documents and so on. If I log off, let's say I just log off that session and I'm back here in my XAE system. Now I click remote log on. It will not work because user type is back as system. And I can use that every so often I want to. No one will detect it as long as they check the change logs, but very unlikely that someone will do that, I guess. That gives you kind of like a backdoor to your ERP system. Keep that in mind. So now we said now my XAE system is a development system or a sandbox. We don't, take authorizations and security too seriously in here. But, since there's connections, we're opening up the landscape. And, I can now use those RFC connections to get into a prod system. Perfect. Also to keep in mind is with Google will find not only hacks. So I mean, here I was showing you, how we can, for example, hijack a developer key, how we can do an RFC hack, how we can, I didn't show you, but for example, how we can hack passwords or crack passwords. But Google also finds other information, and let me show you that. I have it here in my notepad. That's what I mentioned earlier. We, for example, open up our SAP systems for our employees, for our vendors, for our customers, for whoever might be. The problem is we have, when we open up the system so that someone else can access it, someone can also misuse that. So for example, with Fiori now, we have a Fiori Launchpad to log on to our SAP system. We have WebDumpro applications that, give us a logon screen. I can search for that as well. So let's say I search specifically for Fiori Launchpad. So I want to see who has a Fiori Launchpad. So I just search for the string. That's always the same for all the systems. I'm excluding sites sub.com because I'm not interested if someone posted a blog about on SCN on the community. I just want to see what Google can find from a Launchpad perspective. So how many sites it can find that have that Fiori Launchpad HTML? And we can see it here. There's a lot of results, for example, from Deloitte, okay, big company here. We go here, just see if we can click it. Yes, we can. And now we're on Deloitte server, and we're here with the Fiori Launchpad. So now I can here provide a username, password. Granted, I have to have one. But what I wanted to show you is I'm now here on a logon page from Deloitte, and if I have a user or a password, I can try to log on. So what would I try here first? That's probably SAP default users, standard users. What does that mean? If I Google SAP standard users, Google does a good job here to show me, okay, there's a user substar's default password is that. Then we have DDIG, early watch. There's a lot of default users that are created during installation that we need, and so on. Maybe we know admins there. Maybe we know the username, how they provide the username, maybe first character of the first name, then the last name. So for example, Abe Answer. I know that guy used the same password everywhere, so let's just try it, and so on. So if I, for example, let me just try that here, substar, I do username substar, that's the password. I log on. Thank God it doesn't work because too many failed attempts. So it looks like a lot of people tried it already. That's why it's very, very important that we protect our default users, but also our end users. We'll be talking about that here in a second, how we can protect that. So also keep that in mind that even with Google, I have no bad intention. I just want to see, what logon pages do I have? I, for example, search for the Fiori Launchpad. And Fiori Launchpad, if you go to the second page, doesn't give me too many yet. But here, there's still a couple from different companies where, I get to a logon pad. If I search for WebDimpro logon, I will find many, many more than for Fiori because not so many Fiori are implemented yet. With that, I said, protect your default users, your standard users. There's a lot of SAP notes how to change and protect them, with locking, change passwords, and so on, implement password complexity, and so on. Also, and I want to mention with password cracking, there's step-by-step guides, and depending on how you configure your system, there's different complexity types of the password. So you can have a very complex password, or you can have a very weak password in the sense of an algorithm that it uses to generate the hashes. Depending on how we set the system, it's very easy to crack. And and the passwords and the password hashes, they are saved in or stored in tables. So we can see it here. It says here how to retrieve hashes from SAP ABAP system. There's the tables that contain the password hashes. For example, USR02. We always say, oh, why is access to USR02 dangerous? I mean, it is because we have password hashes in there, and those password hashes, they can we can use them to crack them, and then we get the clear text password. How does that work? The problem with password cracking is we have no way to detect that in our system. So let's say in my ERP system, someone exports table USR02. We have password hashes in there. They now run, for example, a software like John the Ripper or Hashcat. There's different tools out there that can be used to crack passwords, and let it run on their computer for a couple of weeks, and they crack all the passwords. The problem is it doesn't happen in my SAP system. They do that on their computer, and at the end of the day, they have the password in clear text, and then they come back to my logon page, like they can find on Google. They type in the username and type in the password, and if they're lucky, the password is still active, and they can log on to the system. So that's very dangerous because there's no way to protect that unless we protect the tables so no one can read those hashes. And there's a lot of tables that contain those hashes that needs to be protected. And it's not only USR02 or views to those tables. Also, for example, password history. There's a table, like you all know, if you change your password, you cannot use the one that you used before, or 5 times before, and so on. Those hashes, those passwords are saved somewhere, and there's a table that holds those hashes. So also tables like that have to be protected, because if I'm a lazy guy and my password is Xiting1, then it's Xiting2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and so on, it's not very hard to figure it out. If it's 6 right now, probably in a month it's 7. So if and that's all in those histories. So also protect those tables. Like I said earlier, with the SAP Patch Tuesday, every second Tuesday a month, SAP points out the vulnerabilities. So if there's a way to get into the system and SAP closes that way, they will post that through a SAP node. And since that subnode is posted, everyone who has access to the, granted to the, has an S user basically, which, it's not very hard to get, has access to the information. And with that, we can, find ways to get into the system. So whenever SAP reveals a vulnerability, make sure that you patch your system. What I showed you earlier with the developer key, we can bypass that. What we can also bypass is the for SAP standard programs and reports, for example. Let me just quickly show you what that means. So if I go back to SC38, and if I change an SAP standard program, like let's say we change that LS key here. So if I go here and click change, I need a developer key, but in addition to the developer key, I also need, it says, okay, what I need as well is an object key. So I need a developer key to develop, but then I also need an object key to change SAP programs. I don't know why it's not asking for that one. Let me get another one, like RS user 002. Let's hope it comes up here. Yeah, here. So if I change that RS user 002, we can see I need a developer key for my user, but then for that RS user 002, I need an access key. So that access key is a further protection method, to protect from changing SAP standard code. Again, I can retrieve that key or can get that key from the support portal. So I need access to that, and then I can get an access key. What's important to know with S/4HANA, that functionality is or will change. So in S/4HANA, we don't require an object key any longer. In S/4HANA, if I have the authorization, so if I have SAP all, I can change every single code in the system, which means I can also change SAP standard code without the need of having, to get an object key. That's important because then, in S/4HANA, authorization is more important, that we have it under control, because there's no further way to protect or protection mechanism. It all relates back to the authorizations. Just one thing to keep in mind when you go to S/4HANA, or if you're S/4HANA, we have to make sure that we have the developing authorizations under control, because that's all that is required. Because we're running a little short on time, there's other hacks that I can show you, or you can try yourself. If you search, for example, for RFC Callback Attack, there's code samples out there, and so on. So a lot of different ways to attack your system. That's dangerous. That allows to gain access from one system to another, or within a system, and so on. Just search it and Google it yourself. You will find a lot of hacks that you can try at home, so to say. But be careful. Don't just play around in your organization, because you can do very bad things. It's more, I just want to open up some eyes, that that there are certain hacks and we have to protect ourselves. So how can we do that? That's different, or there's several security parameters that we can set. There's different concepts we have to follow. I think what's very important is that we have a strict sub-security concept in all our systems. That means we have to protect our dev systems, our quality systems, and also our productive systems. What it also means is that when we talk about a productive environment, productive system, like my XIE here that I was showcasing, I should not only just protect my golden client, which is maybe my 100 or 001, whatever my golden client might be. I also have to protect all the other clients, like T000, the early watch client, and so on. Because if someone gains access to T000, they're in the system. They can then, with programs, they can also access data from the other clients very easily. And so make sure that when you protect and talk about security concept, protect all your systems in the entire landscape, all your clients, and so on. We have to have a stringent authorization concept throughout the entire landscape. Whenever there's a connection from a weak system to a strong system, you have to treat the weak system the same as your strong system. Because if you have loose authorizations, a loose concept in your dev system or whatever system, it might be quality system, Q&A system, and there's an active connection with maybe a user or trusted connection, trusted RFC, that can be misused to gain access to your prod where you have classified or your sensitive information. But then again, also a lot of quality systems, not everyone scrambles their data when they do when they copy back to quality or to dev. So always throughout the entire landscape follow an authorization concept, security concept. You should always restrict access to function modules, so do not generally authorize the RFCs like we showed you before. Don't run them on SAP all, very, very dangerous. There's a SAP note 1682316 where SAP Consulting tells you how you can optimize the RFC users. On that note, what I also want to mention is a lot of customers, they talk about unified connectivity, SAP UConn. SAP UConn is kind of like a firewall where with white and black list we can allow or disallow the execution of function modules. The problem with UConn is it's a firewall, so we either open up a function module or we block it. So in the case I showed you before with the BAP user change, BAP user change is used by the CUA. So if we have CUA in place, we have to open up or we have to whitelist BAP user change, which means in UConn we will put it on the whitelist, so we can access it. The problem if CUA can access it and can execute the function module, then every other user can as well. I mean, if they have the authorizations. So UConn only blocks a function module but doesn't block it by a user. So if I wanna restrict the access to just certain users, then I have to talk authorizations. And if I have SRFC, the RFC authorizations under control, I don't necessarily need UConn, because UConn again is just a firewall to block certain function module calls. If I have the authorizations under control and have everything restricted down to what is really needed, then I don't necessarily need UConn, because it all comes down to the authorizations anyways. If you want to learn more about RFCs, we also have an RFC webinar. It's pre-recorded. Just go to our webpage to the webinar section, and there's a couple of RFC webinars that also talk specifically about UConn in comparison with authorizations. Again, the implementation of security nodes, always keep up with patching every second Tuesday of a month, and that's since 2010, so 10 years already. There's SAP will release security nodes, and they contain vulnerabilities, but they also, they will close it, but if it ultimately reveals the vulnerabilities, so always keep up with patching. Make sure you have the RFC connections under control, especially between the strong and the weak systems. Like I mentioned before, you should have a concept throughout the entire landscape, but also in the weak systems that are connected to the strong systems. What's very helpful, we should also use the tools and methods that are available from SAP. So for example, the secure network communication, the SNC component for encrypted communication that helps us with password sniffing, for example. We should use strict development guidelines. We should think about doing code scanning, especially you remember the 10 lines of code. I mean, I can plant those 10 lines of code everywhere. Can be a legitimate program, and I just plant a backdoor for myself. So that's why we want to use, for example, a code scanner that would detect that. So I think every code scanner out there would detect something like that, that there's capabilities or code in that program that should not be there. And there should be testing, so we should make sure that code gets properly tested and approved. Keep an eye on remote enabled function modules, not just the SAP standard ones, but also custom ones. Make sure that every program, function module, and so on comes to authorization checks. So that should be good housekeeping rules to always have authorization checks in there. I mean, we always say with ST code, if you have a custom transaction, there will be an ST code check. Yes, that's true. There will be one, but that's not sufficient. For certain, not always. I mean, there's cases where it is, but in general, we should have an authorization check in place, that also protects our business data, our sensitive data, and so on. And then also for developers, always check the past parameters. Never trust the caller. We talk about SQL injections and so on. Always validate what's passed to you. Don't trust it. When it comes to user administration, like I said, make sure you follow a concept throughout the entire landscape. But then also when it comes to RFCs, dedicate one user per interface, so have one user per interface, and don't use just one RFC user for your entire landscape. We have seen that where for example WF batch or DDIC, they were used in every single RFC on SAP all. If you have that, very, very difficult to even find out what came from which system, and also there's no way to really protect that because ultimately you need everything. So if you have RFC connections, make sure you have one user per interface, and then that one user can be properly authorized. Again, there's a subnote that talks about that. It's 1682316. That will tell you how you can redesign and restructure your RFC authorizations. Standard users, mentioned that with the with the Fiori logon path. Always make sure you log and change the default passwords. There's subnotes that tell you how to manage and handle default users. Think about the automatic substar. So substar is used for the installation. There's a profile parameter that you can set, so it will not be generated automatically if deleted, because I might have access to delete users. I delete substar, and then when I try again, it will automatically create it if the profile parameter is not set. And if it automatically creates it, that means that it will come with the default password and sub all. For callback attacks, think about to enable positive whitelist. Think about the security parameters you can set for RFCs, but then also think about authorizations. So make sure you have proper authorizations in place and so on. Here's the subnote once again that I mentioned for RFCs. Make sure you get rid of sub all. Sub all is very, very bad on RFCs, or basically for every user. It should not be given. For developer keys, specifically, be very careful with the authorization object as develop, especially when it comes with debug and change. That's similar to sub all. So make sure as develop is restricted in all the systems. Should not be given in a productive environment. To find, for example, someone misuses developer keys, you can monitor the table def access, to see if someone, inserted or added a developer key. I showed you the way with jump the wall, where we can just avoid the developer key, but there's also programs out there, hacking programs that will generate a developer key for you. So you only have to provide the username and the installation number, and it will generate a developer key that actually works. So if someone comes across that on Google and does it, they will probably add it to dev access, and that's why it makes sense to monitor that and also activate the change log. Same for table TADR, where we can see all the new objects that have been created and maintained, development objects, monitor that and see if it's legitimate. With syslog, audit log, we can find debug activities, especially if you do debug and replace. So if someone does what I just did before with jump the wall, that's a debug and replace activity. It will be logged in the audit log, but it has to be periodically reviewed, because otherwise, we will not detect it. For password hacking, like I said, the problem with the password hacking, when someone gets access to the hash values, it will happen outside the system. So we have to make sure that we restrict the authorizations to the tables that contain the hashes, like USR02, USH02, and so on, the password history and so on. But then there's also ways that we can increase the complexity of those passwords. So there's the login parameters, where we can define the minimum length of a password, how many characters it requires, special characters, and so on. But then also the downward compatibility as well, because we have old hashes, newer hashes. The old hashes are easier, or can be cracked easily. The newer ones that use new encryption methods, they're much more sophisticated, so they're more difficult and takes much longer to crack passwords. So make sure you're using the up-to-date encryption method. When you do that, not just blindly do that because it can impact the system as well. So make sure you know what you're doing, discuss it with your basis team, or should be done by basis. But then when you change that, also delete the old hashes, because the old hashes we don't need anymore because we're using a new hash. So we should delete the old ones, and SAP provides reports for that and so on. Also, that's also always an easy win. Maintain the illegal passwords in table USR 40. Passwords like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 should be avoided. So maintain it in table USR 40. You can just go on Google, download the password file. There's huge files out there with millions of records that are known passwords, easy passwords. Maintain them in USR 40 so no one can use it. For password sniffing, especially, or to get rid of passwords, use SNC, use single sign-on. That's another tool we should consider to get rid of passwords, because if you don't have a password and we use single sign-on, I don't have that problem in SAP that someone misuses a password. So one way to do it. But then also to prevent sniffing of the passwords, enable SNC. Again, just don't go blindly and activate it. Make sure you know the impact, because if we enable something, then there's an impact. So for example, if we it could impact our RFC connections and so on. So we want to make sure we have that under control if we change profile parameters. To wrap it up, what's important is I always like to use that quote here from Kevin Mitnick. Companies spend millions of dollars in encryptions, firewalls, security, Rosen authorizations, but it's all money wasted, because none of these measures address the weakest link in the security chain, and the weakest link is your employee. So always keep that in mind too. If we let's say an example like passwords. I mean, nowadays we have hundreds of passwords. We should be using a password manager. I myself, my passwords are 30 characters long. I use a password manager, and I have that secured and protected as good as possible. The problem with passwords, we can make it so difficult that someone is, or the people are unable to remember it. So if you have passwords that are 30 characters long and I cannot remember it, I have to write it down somewhere. We don't educate our guys and our employees to use, for example, a password manager or whatever, or pass phrases that they can remember. They will write it down. So if they write it on a sticky note and put it under their keyboard, then all the passwords and all the measures we put into place, they don't help, because if someone gets physical access to the computer, and they lift up the keyboard, they see the password in clear text, nothing really helps. That's why always keep that in mind too. Key points to take home. Be aware of the broad range of risks in an SAP system. There's risks in basis and security, like we said. Also, when it comes to ABAP development, because there's developments I can do everything. I can access tables, I can manipulate data, and so on. So always make sure we have a very good and stringent development guide and concept. Roles and authorizations are very, very important. I think it's one of the most important things, because if someone has access, if you're authenticated to an SAP system with a user and password, and you have access in there, whatever access is given, you can execute. And that's why it's so important that we have the roles and authorizations under control, especially also through during or after upgrades. When we go to S/4HANA, we should not forget about the authorizations, especially with all the upgrades and enhancements. When we have always to be up to date. With every enhancement, there will be new authorizations, new tables, new transactions, new authorization objects, and that has to be reflected in our roles and authorizations. So through every upgrade, security always have to take a step and has to adjust and fine-tune the authorizations as well. Mitigate the most common risks. Patch days again. Always apply the latest patches. That's an easy one. And then also leverage the technologies that are available, like secure network communication, single sign-on, and so on. Use GRC to find out who has critical access, high privileged accounts, and so on. And also set security parameters. A lot of parameters you can set that are low-hanging, that you can just enable, like the passwords and so on. And then also apply best practices, especially when you design roles and authorizations. Follow least privilege principle approach, especially for your RFCs. If you have an RFC for an Ariba, then just give what Ariba needs. Don't give more, just what the RFC needs to do the job. Think about segregation of duties. So someone that, has two conflicting functions, we try to avoid that as much as we can. If you're unable to avoid it, then put, a compensating control into place, reviews, whatever it might be. To find more information, I think there's a very good book. I'm a co-author, SAP System Security Guide, that talks us through from basis over authorizations, user management, security audit log, how you can protect your system. I think it's a very good read, and if you follow what's in the book, I think you have a very, very solid concept already. There's also a NetViewer security guide that you can access. I've shared a couple of sub notes and so on. If you have any other question, just please feel free to reach out. Here's my email address, or you can find me on Twitter or on LinkedIn, or just drop us an email. And if you have any questions, again, just feel free to ask, that we will try to answer. With that being said, thank you so much for your attention, and have a good rest of your day.